I'm here with Richard Mack. He's the founder of the Constitutional Sheriff's Peace Officer Association. And Sheriff, thank you for being on the phone. And I'm trying to educate the local citizens how important the sheriff's position is and how powerful the position is. And thanks for taking this call with me, and I really appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for having me on. I can tell you honestly that that's one of my favorite topics, and I have a great deal of expertise in that area, so I'm ready and willing.
Okay, so when I think you really came to light with the constitutionality and the power of the sheriff is with gun control, right, in the past?
Well, yes, gun control and my lawsuit against the federal pursuant to the Brady Bill, acted by Congress in 1993, signed into law by Bill Clinton, and then enforced in February. And that very day, I filed in federal district on Mack versus U.S. stop the gun control associated with that, but also to stop the overreach, because the Brady Bill was the first time in American history that the federal government decided to commandeer the office of sheriff to federal bidding. In other words, they commandeered sheriffs to enforce a federal law that we had no say in. So that's really that I'm on the show, and that's really the reason that I've made some or garnered some national prominence, is because that was the only time sheriffs sued the federal government and won a landmark case at the U.S. Supreme Court. And that decision, by the way, is on my website. It's called The Victory for State Sovereignty, and everybody should get a copy of that. It's the most powerful 10th Amendment decision in the history of America.
Well, I appreciate that. And realistically, I did some legal research, and it said the sheriff is the chief administrator of the law. So when you found out, because when you first became a sheriff, I don't think you realized how important the process was, right?
I didn't. I really didn't. I studied the Constitution a great deal ever since I became a rookie cop way back in 1983. I started to study the Constitution, but I'm telling you, it wasn't until I was elected sheriff in 1988, and then the next 3 or 4 years, my study of the office, where I became convinced there is no question that the sheriff in the United States is the CLEO, Chief Law Enforcement Officer for the county, and as Thomas Jefferson said, the sheriff is the top executive of the county.
So when it comes to federal infringement, even state infringement, the county has sheriff has the authority to say not here, correct?
Not only the authority, but the responsibility. We've sworn an oath of allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and of the state wherein we work. And so it's usually a double whammy for the sheriff, especially when it comes to gun control, because both the state and federal government constitutions forbid gun control in this country. And so I'm really amazed how we have over 20,000 gun control laws, and 99.9% of them are all unconstitutional. You would think that many of the state legislatures and definitely the United States Congress think that somehow the Second Amendment says exactly the opposite of what it actually says.
So what can you tell me about political corruption, Sheriff? Has there any instance where a sheriff has actually gone after their own county in regards to local political corruption?
It's happened a few times, but one probably most recently, if you look on the website and find my book, Are You a David? I actually designed that intentionally to have a female sheriff on the front, so that we'd kind of have a dichotomy. Why are you asking me about being a David when there's a female sheriff here? Well, you can see on the in the background, Goliath is coming up behind her, and she's fine because she knows that she has the law and her gun ready. But she arrested at least 3 different public officials in her county for public corruption and malfeasance and she just wasn't going to put up with corruption and these people that think that they can get away with it over and over because they're politicians. And she arrested him, and boy, she took a lot of heat. But she was reelected in a landslide, and she's one of the best constitutional sheriffs in the country, and that's Sheriff Pamela Elliott from Edwards County, Texas.
Now,
and yeah, she's wonderful.
So do you think, is this why that the bureaucrats, the status quo, always want to control who the sheriff and the district attorney is?
Yeah, but that's a funny thing about that. That's why people wish that they could appoint the sheriff instead of having the people elect the sheriff every year or every 4 years. And that's why we're a constitutional republic, because the people decide who their representatives are, especially the people choose their sheriff. They don't have bureaucrats choose them like they do the chief of police and so forth. The sheriff is the only elected law enforcement officer in anywhere in the county and pretty much anywhere in the country, and that's why he or she has so much power, because they report directly to the power source. We, the people, are the only boss and supervisor that the sheriff has.
Now,
and again, that's what makes us a constitutional republic.
Is that why our forefathers more or less broke up into the county level of government to really give more of a stronger grassroots where the states can't really tell us what to do because, we know how to take care of ourselves here? Is that basically... So
that's it, and that's exactly what Thomas Jefferson said the purpose of the county is. This is what the county form of government is, what he explained, is where people really associate closely with local government. He said people should be governed and work with their own leaders at the local level because it's people they know. It's people they live with. And the streets of America should not be patrolled by strangers or bureaucrats. They should be patrolled by people we know, our neighbors, and people we trust. And that trust level is key on all of that.
So, Sheriff, I reached out. I got some pamphlets for you. I joined your organization, and I reached out to some sheriffs. But what I found out is they're kind of intimidated. They're afraid of what they don't know. And then what the sheriff that recently retired here in Niagara County, he basically told me that, well, the Niagara County or the New York State Sheriff's Association doesn't agree with your organization. And I was like...
Oh, well then, that settles it. I need to disband and abolish.
Yeah, exactly. So get this. I looked into this, and I found out that the New York State Sheriff's Association was run by a bunch of attorneys.
Exactly.
So I was like, I thought you'd like to know that. So I was kind of... Then the other thing the sheriffs say, too, one of the sheriffs told me, it's like, Dave, I can't go against the state laws because they give me $50 million a year. So I'm like,
he's
okay,
willing to compromise liberty and his office for money.
So we're being sold out, basically, right?
Exactly.
So this is where, I again, thank you again for coming on, because people don't know. Sheriffs are very intimidated. And now that, and what typically happens in political atmospheres, and I'm sure you've seen this home, is a sheriff or elected official will resign almost halfway or almost through his term, and they'll appoint somebody to the position. That person then gets name recognition to then carry on the same thing they've been doing, enforcing unconstitutional gun laws and not going after any corrupt politicians and basically playing along with the status quo. Have you seen that in your area too?
Yes, and this is the age-old fight and excuse-making that I've seen from sheriffs since I started this organization in 2010. I've heard the most amazing. In fact, I've even put a chapter in one of my books. I've written about 7 or 8 books. I put a chapter about all those excuses. And in fact, I forgot to put one. One was a sheriff in southern Utah said, well, how is it that I'm supposed to be a constitutional sheriff when the Constitution, talking about the U.S. Constitution, the Constitution doesn't even mention the word sheriff anywhere in it. And I'm amazed that he would know that much or study that much to know. He probably had somebody else tell him that. Or he Googled it within the Constitution to see if that word appeared anywhere. But the thing of it is, why would the U.S. Constitution detail the office of a county employee? The Constitution established government for the federal government, not for the county. But it did require, the federal Constitution did require, that every state employee, whether he or she be part of the legislative branch, judicial branch, or executive branch, which we are part of, that's why we're the top executive, we're the executors of the law, but more importantly, we're the keepers of the peace. We are the conservators of the peace. And through our oath of office, we are actually the guards of the Constitution, the protectors of the Republic. And so this excuse about, well, I don't have to be a constitutionalist, or I don't have to keep my oath, because the word sheriff isn't anywhere in the Constitution. How ridiculous can we get? And I admit that this is new stuff, because you know why? It's old. It's so old that bringing back these ideas are making it sound new. If they would just study history on their own, and that's really all I want. I'm just a wake-up call saying we do have this because history tells us so. We took an oath, and so how is it, Sheriff, that you don't have to keep your oath, or that you rely more on the attorneys running the Sheriff's Association of New York than you do on the Constitution itself that you swore to uphold and defend? Do those same attorneys tell you that you don't have to keep your oath? Do these same attorneys say that that is not a crime when you violate an oath? It's perjury. And I don't get this dearth of reverence to keeping our word, or to the vitality and importance of keeping an oath that we make to the people we work for.
100%. Like, I link it to a statement from Benjamin Franklin when they asked, "What did you give us?" I forget the whole aspect of the question.
A republic, if you can keep it.
And I think that the most important, if you can keep it, and that's it, if.
But you see, what does that presuppose? That the people are supposed to be in charge of keeping it.
Yep.
And he didn't say if you're president or if your local legislature. He said if you, the people, if you can keep it. And that's another place where we've really fallen down. And that's what I proposed at the CSPOA. The Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association is a partnership with citizens, with their sheriffs, and with other peace officers and public officials as well, so that we can remember that we're all supposed to be engaged in the holy cause of liberty. And yes, the sheriff is the ultimate protector of the people and of the principles of liberty that our country was founded upon. My question is, to those attorneys in the New York State Association, who's supposed to stand for liberty? In America, who is supposed to stand against tyranny and for liberty? Please tell me where you see the statute that claims who's supposed to do it. Because if it's not the sheriff, please, once again, Mr. Attorney, please tell me who it is. And then I'll start going to them and reminding them of their duty. But the truth of the matter is, I've studied the history of the sheriff a great deal, and I've studied the office, and I've studied the corruption that's going on today. And by the way, we do have a pandemic in America, but it's a pandemic of corruption. And the so-called coronavirus pandemic has brought to light the extreme, obvious extreme presence of universal corruption in this country. And it starts in Washington, D.C., and it goes from there, and it's all about money and who can get grants and who can get more money and pensions. And that sheriff that said he was willing to compromise liberty to keep the $50 million coming, that's just a typical example of that. And that's why we teach, do not take federal grants fund your own office in your county. But sheriff, protecting the Constitution is what you swore to do, and it is your ultimate duty.
So, when I was doing some research in the past, there was a sheriff in Florida. I don't know if it was linked to your organization or if your organization reached out to this. I couldn't find it, where a sheriff protected somebody's rights and the governor removed him out of office. They sued the governor.
Sheriff Nick Finch from Liberty County.
So,
and
explain that story for me.
He got voted out of office.
So explain that
So
story
he's
to
not
me.
sheriff anymore.
He's not sheriff?
No, but he did win. He stood up for a citizen in his county to keep and bear arms. Later, the governor removed him from office because he was charged with a felony for doing so. It was all so bogus and ridiculous. He got a good lawyer, but I was there at the trial, and Sheriff Nick Finch did a masterful job of testifying about the importance of the Constitution in his own trial. He was charged with 2 felonies, and he was found not guilty by a jury of his peers. And it was one of the happiest days of my life when he was found not guilty. He was immediately restored to his office. The county ended up having to pay, or the state, one or the other, all his court costs, which was about $160,000. And then he returned to his job, and he was one of the best constitutional sheriffs in American history.
That's great. So, but the only way you were able to win that case is you had to educate the jury, correct?
Well, he certainly did when he testified, but yes.
Do you find it limit? You know, I kind of blame a lot of the stuff on the attorneys, because the attorneys kind of say, "Well, it's the written law. We can't go against the law."
Okay. So there is a statute in Article 6 that says that the supreme law of the land is the United States Constitution. So let me ask any attorney again: do local traffic laws supersede the Constitution? Do local housing ordinances supersede the Constitution? Does the local criminal code supersede the Constitution? Is there anything in the state that is more powerful and superior to the United States Constitution? Please tell me what those laws are, and please tell me where it is that any state law or ordinance supersedes the Bill of Rights.
You have noticed that the attorneys are just afraid of the Constitution, correct?
They are extremely, because they've actually been taught in law school how to circumvent the Constitution, not to uphold it and defend it as we are all supposed to be doing.
So we had a case here, Army vet, Army Ranger, guy used to train how to fight the Taliban. He comes back after serving 6-8 years, living at home, celebrating a new job, driving home, 2-3 hours after eating dinner, had 1 beer. Little city police pulls him over, runs him through a half an hour of roadside sobriety tests. He's getting a little annoyed now, so he asked the one officer, my next test, if you turn your camera on, please make sure your camera's on during the next test to make sure it's catching what he's doing. And they arrested him because he refused to do the test, right?
Well, you see, they're about ready to arrest us all now for not wearing masks.
Yeah. So,
and I'm telling you right now, those orders, and most of the time they're just orders and sometimes suggestions. Those do not supersede my right to peaceably assemble, or to freely associate, or my right to travel. None of that. Or to choose what I wear on my face. It's just like the seatbelt. They think they could force you to wear a seatbelt. That is a personal choice. Yes, I admit I might be safer if I wear a seatbelt. But my safety is not your concern, and it sure the hell is not a legislative concern of yours. You can persuade, and you can suggest, and you can reason with me. And you can teach me correct principles, but you cannot force me to wear a mask or to wear a seatbelt. That is contrary to any authority any government has ever been given.
But you found that's the bureaucratic system. We'll feed an illusion of safety to give this law from substance to enforce. That's basically what they do. So back to the other case. So they arrested this guy, but they had to do an inventory search on the vehicle. So they found 2 of his Glock magazines in his center console, no pistol, and they were loaded. They were 16 round, 17 round mags,
Okay.
the 9mm usually. And they're loaded to capacity. Well, the Governor Andrew Cuomo just passed the SAFE Act, and it was illegal to have anything more than 7 or 8 rounds. So now they charge him with a felony, refusal, speeding, and he was a veteran. They have what they call here a veterans court. So he could have got off if he just would have behaved himself for a year. But he's like, I fought for this country. I risked my life multitude of times for my rights that I fought for. I'm going to court. I want a jury to hear my case. So he took it to a jury trial. They had a few gun owners on the trial. I was present, and I was familiar with the Fully Informed Jury Association. I had their pamphlets to.
I totally believe in that.
Yep.
That is a wonderful educational system because most of our jurors have no clue what their duty is while
Exactly.
they serve on a jury.
Yep. So let me explain what happened. So during recess, I mentioned to the prosecuting attorney, I says, I have these jury nullification pamphlets. How would you feel if I gave them to the jury so they understood what they can do? This female stomped her foot and walked away. And she says, that's jury tampering, and she walked away. I says, no, it isn't. I says, there's a Supreme Court decision that said we have every right to educate the jury. And she walked off. So we go back in after recess, and the judge calls me out. Mr. Mangello, it's yes, Your Honor. I'm like, okay, what's going on now? It's during a felony trial. The judge calls my name out. It's like, geez, are you going to charge me for jury tampering now? Even though I just asked the prosecuting attorney. So he goes, and so he put this on the record. He says, Mr. Mangello, this is my opinion on the matter. He goes, you can't give it to the jury while they're in the courthouse. But if you want to give the pamphlets to the jury while they're in the parking lot, that's okay, he says.
Yeah, that's kind of a funny difference. I've seen that before.
Right? So then, but you might want to talk to the defense attorney because I think he feels he has a really good jury in this case. So later on during a recess, I talked to the defense attorney, and he's like, I don't really want to bring jury nullification in this. It'll make the case more complex and going on. And I says, Jim, we're dealing with ignorance here. We're not going to know if the jury is going to know they can judge the law with their heart. We have to educate them. But he chose, so they let him charge the jury. So the charge of the jury was, if all the elements aren't there, you must find them guilty. You must find them not guilty. But if all the elements are there, you may find them guilty. But we're kind of hoping the jury was going to pick that up. And guess what? They didn't. They found him guilty of a felony.
My God.
They were disturbed because afterwards I tried questioning the jurors as they were leaving the courthouse. I was keeping my distance and asking questions. I said, did you guys know you could have said not guilty because you thought the law was wrong in itself? So after the third group of jurors walked by, the last person came up to me and says, what did you say? She was really interested in what I had to say. I says, yeah, the jury you could have just said not guilty if you felt the law was wrong in itself. She goes, what do you mean? And then one of the bailiffs yelled at me, said, leave the juror alone. Jurors, get out of the building. They forced the jurors to leave and didn't want me to talk to them. Which that's a violation of law, too. We had every right to talk to them.
The jury's not under his care at that point.
Exactly. So they violated law by doing that. But there's but in this case, Rich, Sheriff Mack, could the sheriff have intervened and said, no, he can't be charged? Can he override the district attorney?
I've never seen that. I would like to see him try to do that. I would like to see him work with the judges and the prosecutors a lot more in those types of matters. But I would like to see him, if not, I would like to see him be an expert witness, take the stand. I've done that myself a couple of times.
Because we're up against, we have gun organizations here that do meetings, and they invite politicians, the sheriffs, and they always say, hey, we're not going to enforce the SAFE Act. We're not going to enforce it. Here, the district attorney says she's not going to enforce the SAFE Act, yet they prosecuted this guy. And this is what people, and now this district attorney's running for judge. And this is what people really don't quite understand because they're not educating themselves on who a lot of these people are running for office.
Right.
Here, I'm going to explain a little story. The district attorney was on the radio one day, and I called her to ask her questions. And I asked questions about the grand jury. And if they had the authority to investigate certain things, she goes, yes, Dave, they do, but they have to use the law. I said, that's a really good point. I says, which law are you referring to? The law mentioned in the natural law mentioned in the Declaration of Independence, the common law mentioned in the Bill of Rights, or statute, codes, and rules that the bureaucrats write? Which law are you referring to? And she hung up the phone on me.
Well, I always go back to the supreme law of the land. And that's our first and most important obligation, is to uphold and defend the supreme law of the land. And so that's the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution.
Exactly, which is basically based off common sense law. Is it good or is it bad, correct?
Right. And even before that, it's God's law. The founders intended to put God's law in the Constitution and Declaration of Independence, is where it says all men are created equal, and equal application of the law must also be a part of that, and that's all basic, and it's moral, and that's where we've really lost our way, because we have prosecutors who want to do just what your prosecutor wanted to do, and that is build a career on the backs of innocent people.
True, 100%. So I was listening to Judge Napolitano. It was a YouTube video, and he was talking about the words in the Bill of Rights. And he was, the right to keep free speech, the right to keep and bear arms, and the other rights. And he says, what the most important word was, he says, is the word the. He says, because the indicated it's something that existed prior to the writing of the document. So I thought that was really interesting. I'm not sure if you even, knew that either. Yeah. So it's really interesting when you start learning details, and that's the biggest disturb. A lot of people don't know. And sheriffs that are currently elected, they tend to be part of the system, and to crack that shell and to wake up, like you were woken up. You realized that there was a problem. You realized the current system had no way of being fixed. So you started, investigating other avenues, and you have found other sheriffs to jump on board with you, correct?
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I really hope my life is dedicated to that one thing, that we can have sheriffs understand the importance of their role in defending liberty, so that we can restore the Constitution and thus protect the people's rights in this country. I think it's a simple process, but it's really hard to get the sheriffs and other peace officers to the trough, let alone to have them actually drink of the waters of liberty that they all need to be participating in. But I'm so encouraged by the coronavirus hysteria, where dozens of sheriffs have actually stopped and said, you know what, you guys, I'm not doing this. And we just had Sheriff Scott Jones in Sacramento tell Governor Newsom that he was not going to enforce the mask law or mask rule or mask order because it was just too, he said it's inappropriate. He said inappropriate. And I find that wonderful. Yeah, it's common sense, Governor, that we don't arrest people for not wearing something on their face that you made a law because you've listened to some doctor who says, yeah, we need to do that. I've got just as many doctors who say we shouldn't be doing it. And Dr. Batar, my immunologist, says that people, especially elderly people, need to be breathing in fresh air, not carbon dioxide emissions from their own body. And you do that long enough, and you're going to destroy your immune system, not build it.
Yeah, I think recently the top doctor in the White House. What's his title there?
Surgeon General.
The Surgeon General. He recommended nobody wears masks. Only if you're sick. If you're sick, wear a mask. And that's right from the top dog. Then the CDC comes back. Oh, don't listen to him. So it's like it's really crazy what's going on there.
There's a lot more than the Surgeon General saying it, and it. I don't trust who. I think they're run by criminals and communists. I now don't. For a long time, I haven't trusted the CDC either because I don't believe in all these ridiculous immunizations that they talk about. And here we're going to be forced with this issue now very soon. Are we going to, as sheriffs of this country, allow people to be forced to be vaccinated for the coronavirus? And what? Well, if they don't allow it, then we're going to have to take their children from them.
Well, I think that there's massive scare and hysteria that the majority is so uneducated. They don't do the research. They're brainwashed by the media. They're just going to fall into the line, give the sheriff the power, and force the sheriff to do what they want to do, more or less have a democracy instead of a republic, a rule of majority, where the minority has no rights. Pretty soon they'll be locking up the people that think they have rights, because that's just crazy. You can't think that. It's... that's where the sheriff is really important. What have you found that worked the best for getting sheriffs involved in your organization?
If we can get them to attend one of my CSPOA seminars, it changes their attitude and their outlook on their own jobs. And that's all we ask, is that you listen, and if we say anything that's not true, don't do it. If we say something that is true, please do it.
Do you have specific groups of attorneys that help your organization out that believe in your cause?
Yes, but they're constitutional. They know and understand constitutional law. They've studied the Constitution and the Founding Fathers. One is on our board. His name is Michael Peruka. But most of them that we have helping are retired police officers, retired sheriffs, and then yours truly, retired sheriff and cop. If anybody will study this stuff, I've spent 20, 25 years studying this stuff, and I put it into a presentation that I want to show and share with other peace officers and sheriffs. And boy, I'd love to come up to the Buffalo area, in your own county, in Niagara County, and come and do that there.
Oh, we might with the virus. Only 5 people allowed in the room, I think.
So yeah.
So your videos are pretty. I'm going through your website right now. You got a news section in here, and also there's a video in here. I think you got quite a few videos out over there over periods of time that you have done. So I'll share them with people with this video here. And then, is there anything else you'd like to share?
Well, everybody can become a member of what we're doing, and we love citizens joining and getting involved in the process. It's only $50 to become a member for 1 year. That's less than $4 a month. Come on. But the thing of it is, you're helping this organization become more successful, and that we can reach out to more sheriffs. And again, it creates that partnership between sheriffs and the citizen. And so everybody go to cspoa.org, become a member, get those little booklets. They fit right in your shirt pocket. They're pocket-sized booklets called The Victory for State Sovereignty. You get 5 for $10. You should get hundreds of them. And give them to your public officials and servants. A review of the Supreme Court decision, the only time in history where sheriffs sued the federal government and won a landmark case.
Excellent. Well, thanks for being on with me. Thanks for taking your time. I really appreciate it, and keep up the good work.
Thanks. See you soon.
Yeah, take care.